Good evening and welcome to the Velocity of Now with me, your host Thomas Sheridan. It's the 13th of January 2016, what should be called the post-Bowie era. Tragically lost this week. And my website is www.thomassheridanarts.com. You can support me there by buying a book or even sharing these videos or sharing my blog articles if you have no money. It's always good to be paid for what you do, and anyone who thinks you make a fortune from books, I got news for you, you don't. Unless you're writing Harry Potter and your name is J.K. Rowling and you get movie deals. Otherwise, it's a pathetic existence when you have people who've won the Pulitzer Prize having to go back to work as miners in Australia because they couldn't make a living from writing. Just like musicians can't make a living from playing music for most cases. So that's just how it is, and I like doing this show. I would do it either way, but you know, if you could support me by buying a book or whatever, I'd really appreciate that. And thank you for all you people who supported me in recent years and allowed me this part-time job and the opportunity to share with you my very, shall we say, dynamic and interesting life and the kind of things I get up to. And boy, tonight are you going to get an insight into the kind of things I get up to. Now, tonight is going to be a very deep program, shall we say. And before I get into this topic, I want to warn you, I'm going to be playing some audio files and talking about subjects that are not appropriate for people of a nervous disposition or children. Anyone who may be easily scared, this is probably not the program for you. If you're interested in Fortean subjects like I am, and you're interested in the idea that perhaps there is other entities or other non-human intelligent consciousness that exists outside this five-sense reality, well, tonight I might probably blow your mind, because I've blown my own mind. That noise you hear in the background is not an EVP, that's my cat Jerry Wee Lewis scratching the sofa. Now, so I'll let Jerry Wee stop. Now, I've always been interested in the subject of electronic voice recording ever since I was a young kid. When I was about 11 or 12, the BBC did a documentary on ghosts that absolutely scared the living shite out of me. And it was not the fact that they were talking about ghosts, it was not the fact that they were going to haunted locations, it was specifically one part of the film where they visited this church in England that was allegedly haunted by a nun that had died there or been executed. I don't know what the story is, but they set up a tape recorder on the pew in the church where the Bible or the big book was. And at one point in the night, they got an incredible EVP of the pages being turned in the book, but they weren't actually being the sound of pages being turned in the book, and also a distinctive sound of a woman sighing as the pages were being turned. This made me kind of obsessed with EVP as a kid, and I began with my very poor quality cassette recorder. You remember those old top loader cassette recorders that had a little handle and they took a couple of D-cell batteries and they had a little wee microphone in the corner that you could record yourself or your friends having a laugh or recording top of the pops off the TV. Sometimes they had a little mic that plugged in the side that you could like pretend you were on the radio or something. Well, I had one of them, and of course it wasn't very good, and I left the recording thing on two sides of a C90 cassette, and then you listen back and you hear all kinds of sounds. Now, I do believe that on that tape I captured, this is when I was about 15 or something, I did capture a specific strange sound of an EVP late at night. But it was very difficult on those old recorders because, well, there's two reasons. One, they were not very good quality recording, and there'd be a lot of hiss and wow and flutter on the cassette. The technical aspects of the cassette, but that was a problem. And so I did it over a few times, played it for my friends, and we used to find words or statements in there. Looking back on it now, a lot of that would be us imposing our prejudice on that. And this is because I was looking for a ghost. I was looking for human beings. Then later on, I got a digital recorder. And it was not a digital recorder, a Walkman recorder with a very, very high quality microphone. I was using it to record rehearsals with bands and stuff like that. It was a very good quality Walkman, and it was like the top end at the time, and it had a very good stereo mic in it. And again, I got EVPs, and again, I think I was, shall we say, putting my, like, if I heard something like, I'd say, oh, it's saying, what do you say? You know, that kind of thing. Again, it wasn't an ideal thing. So I've left the subject for many years, read up on it. Occasionally, 40 times I'd have articles on it. I'd watch things on TV, like the Ghost Hunters TV show, which I'll get back into a minute. Other programs where it had EVPs. And again, it was a digital recorder, and the idea was they were looking for a ghost or something that was speaking English. Now, I decided to forego the whole idea of ghosts as being people that came back from the dead, and they're trying to talk to us. My recent research and discovery into this stuff in recent years has led me to believe that ghosts don't even exist as dead people coming back. I believe they're actually some kind of projection of our subconscious making these noises and these events, or they are other forms of consciousness, other beings, what our ancestors called the fairies, what the Islamic world called the jinn, what they called the Dybbuk in the Jewish tradition. Non-human living demons is the word. And when I started to look at these electronic voice phenomena as demons rather than ghosts, was when I started to develop this project, which I'm going to reveal tonight, which I call the Djinn jar, D-J-I-N-N, even though I don't know that's what I've captured on video. But I'll explain the process of how I built the jar. You can watch the video here on YouTube. As this program, The Velocity of Now, is sort of becoming more like a TV show at this point, and hopefully I will develop it more like with more video and so on, which is one of the reasons I've gone completely to YouTube. Now, when this occurred to me that it could be another being that's not human, rather than a ghost, say a dead person come back, that's when things strangely started to happen. And at the height of when I was getting ready for this experiment, many of you have heard the Jimmy Savile 666 broadcast. If you haven't, go back and listen to it. It is loaded with bizarre noises at very strange points, and I'm going to play one of these for you now. That this was, I think, one of the most pivotal moments in my own investigation into Fortean matters. Have a listen to this. Another one was out there, as did David Yallop, who claims that the murders continued somehow or someone else was involved. And that person, in my opinion, was the TV presenter, paedophile on an industrial scale, and perhaps one of the most evil creatures that ever walked this earth to attain that kind of power. And that was Jimmy Savile. So, and perhaps one of the most evil creatures that ever walked this earth to attain that kind of power. And that was Jimmy Savile. That was Jimmy Savile. That was Jimmy Savile. That was Jimmy Savile. Even now, listening to that Jimmy Savile thing gives me the heebie-jeebies. The night that was recorded, it must be about 2 years ago now, on the old Type 1, well, not the my old Velocity of Now, on the Type 1 network, which is still going strong. Steve over there in Brighton was the producer of the show that Sunday evening. He said to me that when he was listening to the show, his hairs were standing on edge because it was very intense. And I was extremely intense during the broadcast into how I felt, because I was about to reveal something that had never been revealed before, that Jimmy Savile was, in my belief, a serial killer. This was a huge story for me because this video is now massive. And it's now pretty much talked about. Now, this was long before it came out that he had sex with dead bodies in morgues and wore the eyeballs he pulled from the corpses in the morgues and made rings and jewelry out of them. And indeed, even before I launched my theory that he modeled his image on Moira Hindley, the serial killer's famous mugshot from 1966. So the tension was extremely high that night. Now, all through that broadcast, at pivotal points, these weird noises appeared. It never happened in any of the show before or any of the show after. Not to that level, anyway. People who listened to the show, were telling me the next day on Facebook that they were shitting bricks listening to it because they couldn't figure it out. They thought it was their imagination, that when I'd mention Savile or mention a specific thing to do with it, this weird guttural kind of noise would come in. Especially that very, very loud one, which I repeated 3 times there in that segment, where I mentioned his name and it was just almost like groan. Now, people put the sound, which is I'm going to do with the audio file I got tonight. I'm going to put it in SoundCloud so anyone can download it and experiment with it any way they want. But this file I did the same, and people sound engineers put it through. You can see the graph up above here. They put it through their thing, and they found things like words like, there was one person, and I don't have it, actually isolate one section that sounded like I got away with it. This kind of thing. And so it was so hair-raising, and I was alone that night in my studio. There was no one else in the house. The cats were locked away. There was no wind blowing. I live in the country. It was very calm and still. And the energy level in the room when I did that show was shocking. Shocking to the point that the next morning, my phone line was dead, and I had to call out an engineer from Aircom, the phone company, who came out and showed me the box that the internet and the phone plugs into, and it was fried. And he said, "Were you hit by lightning?" I believe that the two events are not disconnected. Now, this really set me off in terms of looking at this phenomenon again. Even though it was quite accidentally picked up on the show, it piqued my interest and other people's interest too. Now, I started watching programs on TV about how they record EVPs, and it's all these ghost hunter type shows. And on these shows, they use a digital recorder, or they have a thing called a ghost box and all these other things. It's still under the assumption that they're communicating with some Mary Jane from the 1500s. Right? This is the fundamental mistake they're making on these shows, because it's all stereotyped induced. They do it in nighttime and things like this with these infrared cameras to create this spooky atmosphere. If a paranormal element is real, you can be aware of it at any time of the day. You don't have to be in the dark with an infrared camera and this kind of thing. That's all theater. That's all theatrics. Now, I know I keep saying now, but it's like I'm trying to capture my next phrase properly and present it properly to you. I decided to go full on with this And instead of getting an EVP of a ghost of a departed soul, quote unquote, I decided to go to full hog and not only get the sound of an entity, but capture an entity. As ludicrous as that sounds, I'm not sure if it's real or not. I just followed the instructions. Now, the process I used for this was a Kabbalistic. I have a couple of friends, but one in particular who was a Kabbalistic expert. Now, I trust the Kabbalistic system because it takes, firstly of all, it's based on a very similar kind of idea as the Goetia. And the Goetia and Crowley and Kabbalism speak a lot about, they speak a fair bit about capturing a demon or capturing a spirit. It goes right back to King Solomon in ancient times in the Middle East. Essentially, what you need is some kind of vessel to have something in there that captures the entity and then locks it in there. My friend and I, following the old texts, came up with a device which I built, which I called a Djinn jar. Now, knowing a bit about electronics and knowing, well, I studied electronics, so I know a fair bit about analog electronics. We came up with the idea that if we were going to capture an entity, it was going to be a Dybbuk or a Djinn, and we'd have to find the right location. Luckily for me, I live near the perfect location for undertaking this experiment. And I want to talk about the location first before I go into the specifics of the construction of the Djinn jar. The location I picked is it should be more well known, and it's been well known enough for that TV show about 10-15 years ago, Ghost Hunters. You know, the one where they have the American guys? They're all quite likable, actually. There's a bald guy, and they are plumbers, and what they do is they investigate ghost stories. Well, they came to Ireland in one of them, and one of the places they visited was Lisheen House here in County Sligo. Now, Lisheen House is a ruined stately home. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the pictures of it. Now, I'm going to read from my blog an article I wrote of a visit there. I wrote this on the 9th of March 2014. I want to read this to you. A disturbing visit to Lisheen House ruins. Following reports that a ruined stately home not far from where I lived was being used for satanic rituals, I decided to check the location out. It takes a lot for me to be scared. However, Lisheen House had me leaving in a hurry. The building is literally saturated with a sense of foreboding and dread. I have not before experienced anything like this. The walls were almost aggressive in their nature. While I was there, I could hear bricks and other debris falling from the high walls to the ground below, as if they were being hurled at me. I laughed at first, assuming it was teenagers having a joke. It wasn't. Lisheen House is a place of evil in every sense of the word. The former home of William Phoebes. The ruins of Lisheen House stand on the outskirts of Strandhill, County Sligo, overlooking Ballysadare Bay. The building was once used to house a large collection of esoteric artifacts allegedly brought about during rituals which took place in the long gallery on the first floor, including Egyptian mummies, swords and daggers, which were collected by Owen Phibbs. The house was suddenly vacated in 1938, if local rumour is to be believed, when a coach brought the devil to the front door one evening. Following this unexpected visitor, the house was then subjected to intense poltergeist activity, confirmed and well documented by both people working in the house, around the grounds, and observers, as objects and even furniture was being constantly smashed to pieces every night. After all the staff had resigned and the family could find no one to work there due to the supernatural events taking place, the house and its contents was sold in 1938 and then abandoned, giving to the entities which now occupy this room. Now, if you look at the photographs I took that day, you'll see that compared to its former grandeur, Lycian House is now basically just a shell covered in a vast amount of, it's like ivy and mistletoe. It's actually quite impressive. In the background there, you can see in one of the pictures Knock Noray Mountain, where Queen Maid's Cairn is, the ancient megalithic monument, and also on the grounds of Lycian House itself is a very impressive, what they call fairy fort or rath. It's right next to the beach. Now the whole inside of the house, I took these photographs which you can see. Now one of the interesting thing is that some very amazing artists have painted these cool looking faces, cool and scary looking faces on the walls. In the Ghost Hunters TV show, which I will put a link to below, at one point the paranormal investigators saw and captured on video a face in the dark that looked just like the face on the walls inside the house. In the grounds and not in the house, by the way. So it wasn't a face on the wall that they captured. They were way off near the rath, about 100 meters away. Now this place is where I chose to install the Djinn jar because I reckoned it would be the best place to capture these entities if they exist. Now I built this Djinn jar a long time ago, but I didn't get the opportunity to do this experiment because I was waiting for the right time. Now the so-called satanic events taking place in here may well be just teenagers messing around or something real. I don't know. However, I wanted to do it where there'd be guaranteed to be nobody around. So I put the Djinn jar along with the digital recorder into a slot in a hole in the wall in the house. You can see where on the pictures where the bricks have fallen out. And it was off the ground above a mantelpiece. There's two reasons for this. One, I wanted it out of the way where wind wouldn't get to it. Two, I wanted it to be visible, so I wasn't going to cover it in something. I put it in a box. Now this thing is completely soundproof, so it's not exterior sound, and the setting of the sensitivity of the digital recorder that directly feeds into it is quite low. Also being off the ground, it wasn't going to be knocked against by a badger or a fox wandering around the ruins at night. And that's another thing about these ruins. There's absolutely never ever hear birds singing inside. You never see birds flying over it. It is completely dead in every sense inside. And I left it there overnight on Christmas night, going into St. Stephen's Day or Boxing Day, as they call it in the UK. This guaranteed there'd be nobody around. I collected the next day. Now I put the battery in it, and this thing will. I have a long memory card inside the Zoom recorder, and technically it could record all night, except it recorded only about an hour and a half. The battery ran out. It was quite cold, and the AA battery did that. Powers the Zoom recorder, didn't last. However, I got an hour and a half of audio at about 6 o'clock in the evening, and I can tell you that when that thing was recording, nobody was around, and it was dark. No, actually, it was earlier than that. It was about 4 o'clock. It was about 4 o'clock, and and so at the end of this recording, it's closer to 6 p.m. Nobody was in there, no one was around, and the sounds were recorded. Now, let me show you the construction of the Djinn jar, what it looks like, and how it works. So, here it is. This is the demon catcher, quote unquote. Built to the design my Kabbalist friend showed me. It's a straightforward glass jar going into a Zoom digital recorder with a microphone suspended inside the jar and then sealed with wax there's almost no exterior sound unless it's loud can get from the outside in. On the top is a standard bayonet lamp holder. The reason why I used this was twofold. I had to isolate the copper wire which holds the crystal, and secondly, the copper wire would prevent, it had to be isolated in such a way that if something had a means to get in by passing through the oak, which is covered in lead on the bottom side, you can't see it. It has no way of coming out because copper affects it. This is just a standard jack, a mini jack, a 3.5mm mini jack going into the Zoom recorder, which is set on a low level of 19, so it'll pick up almost nothing unless you bang it or something from the outside. There is the wax seal around the oak top. You can see it's got quite a bit of dust on it. It's been all over the place. There is the snow quartz crystal, which is suspended on the copper. The snow quartz crystal acts like a sponge and holds the story is holds the entity in, and the sigil on the bottom, which I can't show you in detail because it may be too dangerous for some of you to try, but that is the real deal, believe me, made for me by a Kabbalist. The purpose of the snow quartz is twofold. Snow quartz is used in psychic attacks or the nullification of what in this is now I'm talking about this is the belief in magic of capturing a demon. The snow quartz is almost like a sponge. It's almost like a excuse me. It's almost like an absorber. So the idea being, now I got the snow quartz from the beach beside Lisheen House. Snow quartz everywhere around here. So I got it on the beach, so it's local, and it's, so that even added to the power. It's right next to the Rath, by the way, the fairy fort. This is suspended in the middle of the jar. At the bottom of the jar is the sigil. Now this sigil, allegedly, is supposed to be attractive to demons. And the idea is that once the demon goes into the jar, through the copper wire, allows it to get in. Once it's in there, or it passes through the glass, or it passes through the wood seal, once it goes inside there, it's almost like a golem type effect. It's drawn to the sigil. This is the purpose of the sigil in this situation, and then it's trapped in there by two things. One, the quartz crystal, which it cannot move away from. And B, the underside of the wooden oak lid is painted with white lead paint in order to, the lead stops it from escaping through the top. It's basically in a kind of a prison. It can see out, this is how the theory goes, but it can't get out because it's trapped within the crystal itself. Now, I had made this thing and tried it at home and I got nothing on it. And then I tried everything, the volume, the lot. Then a while back I took it to what I believe to be a very strange house that's in ruins near here, which I once saw a weird light moving through the house, and I put it in there for about a half an hour and got a very similar kind of sound to what I'm playing to tonight, but not as spectacular as what I'm getting. What I got from this in terms of the recording, the sound, it sounds very much like what Nikola Tesla described when he was messing with radio and wireless and believing he was getting demons or something. Now, before I play this, let's talk about, is this exterior sound? I don't think it is. For one, it can't. Yeah, I know crystals can actually pick up radio signals, but the sound I'm going to play for you does not sound like the voice on a radio or a police radio or anything like that. It also stops. It also has a conversational aspect to it, like it's babbling, like when they talk about speaking in tongues, it sounds like that. But what's really strange is it stops at certain points and there's a secondary sound, and I cannot figure out there's two tones. One is this babbling sound, and the second one is this kind of like a hum, but it's not just a constant hum. It comes on and off, like the two sounds are communicating with one another. It's not a digital signal because it can't pick it up. The digital recorder can't pick it up. If I plug the mic in, it'll just pick up sound. Now, I've done nothing to this signal, and I'm going to make the except amplified so you can hear it on the show. But I did not do any processing to it, and I'll put the original signal on my SoundCloud program site, which you can download yourself and have a go and see if you can find or decipher it or whatever it is. But the sound and what I got is described exactly as what they said the Dybbuk sounded like. Speaking in tongues, babbling, babel, babbling. And let me play it for you now. Hold on. I'm doing this in a kind of a live on a video program that records audio, so it's a bit messy tonight, so bear with me. Part of that sound clip that I've just played is a part that happens about 36 seconds, between 36 and 50 seconds, no, sorry, 36 seconds into it, where the babbling stops, complete stops, silence. Now, if you download the original file, you will see this. There's nothing in there except that occasional other sound. But the speaking in tongues, the babbling, which is the sound when you look at these TV evangelist preachers and they start talking in what the, in the Pentecostal church, a big thing is speaking in tongues, where they claim they're channeling the ancients. This is probably this very similar to that sound they make. They're probably these monsters inside these Pentecostal little churches are channeling it, the same entity I have in the jar, and it's coming through their tongues. That's if they're not making it up. But I've seen videos of some of them, and they're not making it up. They're like literally, they're like the people with the Ouija boards. They're possessed during that moment because the demon is a liar. This is the same sound. Now, the pause is so interesting to me because if this was radio interference, that babbling, now you can download the file and analyze it, and you'll see I deleted nothing. That babble or filtered out nothing. You'll just get it as it is with the volume increased double. I doubled the volume. If you want to slow down the babbling and see if you can find things in there, you're welcome to it. This is the velocity of now. When we do these 14 programs, is an open source laboratory. We're all working in this laboratory together. It's an open project. The sound stops. Why does it stop like that? It's almost like a ceasing in the conversation. And then it begins again. I find this the most disturbing and creepy aspect of all. Now, I played this file for my friend. He's a bit of an odd character. Well, he's not weird or he's you know, he's a normal guy, the family and everything, but he's a bit kind of intense. And he just looks at me and he goes, "Oh, looks like you were Oh, Thomas, looks like you were real lucky fish. You got lucky when you were out fishing." And so he says it's the real deal, that inside that jar is a Djinn or a Dybbuk. Now, I have the jar in my house at the moment, and I don't like it because I only brought it in so I could film it and put it on this video. I'm scared that I'll drop it or break it or something. The Djinn jar is going to be taken back somewhere, possibly to a beach. I'm going to dig a hole and I'm going to bury it deep under the sand and leave it there. I don't want this thing in my house as long as I have to have it inside here, because more than the audio volume, more than anything, do you remember the program I did on I see, this is what's the effect it has on me. On Roslyn Chapel, I said that when I went into Roslyn Chapel, I had to leave after half an hour because the energy was so intense it made me feel weak. Well, that's how this thing makes me feel when I'm near it. If I put my hands around it, I feel my hands getting colder. I feel a sense of nausea. And I don't like the motherfucker one bit. I don't want it near me. I don't like it. I keep it on the ground all the time, away from the cats, so it can't be knocked over or fall down and smash. I'm probably going to bring it to the beach tomorrow and bury it in a secret location for that reason. Maybe, I don't know where, but I will. And hopefully no one finds it. I'm not going to throw it in the sea in case it washes back up and some kid finds it and opens it. Because I don't know what this thing is capable of, but I don't like it. I don't like anything about it. Except that, and I told people I was doing this experiment a while ago, and I was putting off the program because I thought I wouldn't get any decent recordings. But as you can see, I got an hour and a half of something quite disturbing. It sounds like many of the things that people have described, saying they were hearing alien voices. Do you remember that movie? I can't remember what it was called, but it was quite a good sci-fi film with Charlie Sheen in it from about 20 years ago, where he captures the set. Oh, no, actually, no, I'm sorry. You know what it sounds like? The baby monitor in the movie Signs with Mel Gibson. Do you remember when they put the baby monitor on the air and they heard this sound? Well, that was actually based on what people had thought they'd heard of aliens or extraterrestrials. And the sound that I picked up inside the Djinn jar is almost identical. It's the same thing. And it's funny that you say that, because as I'm recording this, I had just posted a story to my Facebook page of baby monitor stories that happened where strange sounds come through the baby monitor, or people, excuse me, weirdos hack into them. I often wonder if they're even humans, and they talk to the baby while the baby's in the room and there's no parents there. The sound is very similar to the sound when, what was his name? Queen Phoenix holds up the baby monitor and they hear that sound of the aliens in the air. It's very similar to that, which is kind of double creepy. And this brings home what I've always speculated, that these so-called ghosts, aliens, and the lot are not what we're told they are, departed spirits or visitors from other planets, but they are actually here. They're actually here as what our ancestors called the fairies, the She, the demons, the entities. The later Whitley Strieber called them the visitors in that film and the book Communion. What the Jewish Kabbalists called the Dybbuk, what the Islamists called the Jinn. They're another form of life. Now, the speeding up thing is interesting because there is stories of people having been taken into the fairy world, and the fairy world had a different time than the human world. In the fairy world, a minute could last for a year, and a day could last for a century. And these voices sound like they're communicating some kind of verbiage with a very, very high speed. Now, I haven't slowed this file down because this is enough for me. This is what I want. I want this amount of sound left as it is, and then I want others to look at it, listen, and explore it. This is an open source laboratory, like I said. This could be also some kind of glitch, weird recording, something quite normal. Maybe the crystal is picking up signals. It doesn't make any sense to me that any radio frequency broadcast of someone talking on a CB or police radio would be talking at high speed like that. That makes no sense, for starters. And secondly, these interruptions is what really disturbed me. If that had been that babble all the way through that tape, that recording, I would have said, it's some kind of interference. But there's the gaps in sound like specific gaps in a conversation. Listen again. I'm going to play the file again at about the 35th second. Watch the video and see the signal on the screen that I recorded in Audacity of the file, and you will see how it stops. Just watch it again and listen again and watch it again. Clear as anything, there are gaps in the babbling, and this proves it's not a continuous RF radio frequency signal that the thing is picking up. It's not a Wi-Fi router, which it wouldn't pick up anyway because that's a digital signal. If this was going to pick up any kind of signal, it would be an analog signal, and there's not as many of them in the air as there used to be anymore. Terrestrial TV signals have been shut off in Ireland for a couple of years. It's all digital now, and there's still radio stations broadcasting, but that's not a radio station. It's clear as anything, and the the crystals and the wires will not speed up someone talking on a police or, you know, military radio. And they're all digital too as well these days. Everything is digital. Phone, everything. This is an analog system. This is an analog system. See, we can control the analog systems. See, if people had analog transistorized baby monitors, they wouldn't be hacked into. Like I spoke on the other Velocity Now special, Who's Scrying Now? The digital system we've no control over, but the analog one we can. Now, the early days of radio were very, very much about trying to communicate with what they called spirits. There's an article on my blog, I'll post that below. Many of the early developments were this kind of thing. And even scientists like Alexander Graham Bell, Marconi, and Nikola Tesla all were involved in this, even if it was just fleeting. They were still involved in it. Tesla thought they were people from Mars. Others thought they were spirits or discounted it. I'm going to put out there that I believe that this is the non-human entities, if they exist. This may be good proof of it. So that's tonight's show finished. I hope I gave you food for thought. This is a different program than many others, and now I'm feeling quite tense and a bit nervous. So I probably won't sleep tonight. It's starting to feel right now like a psychic attack. I'm feeling a pressure on my chest. I'm feeling somewhat nauseous and sick, and almost like an inner ear infection. And so I'll leave the show now. My website is thomassheridanarts.com. I'm first sign of light tomorrow morning. I'm going to take a shovel, go to the beach, and bury this thing as deep as I can dig, and hope no one ever finds it. My website is thomassheridanarts.com. This YouTube channel is Thomas Sheridan Arts. If you can go to my blogs or website, share this, share anything I have, or buy a book or support me, I would be very grateful. I want to make this the most unique program in alternative radio and original, and to keep you all interested, because I like to keep my life interesting. This has been a very good Fortean experiment for me, which won't be repeated. We'll leave it to history. You can have the EVP. I cut out at the beginning of the EVP, or the audio file, you could hear me putting the jar, like a tinkling sound when I put the jar up on the slot in the wall. I clipped that out because it's just, and then waited a little while afterwards, like 5 minutes, and then gave you that pure file until the battery ran out. And so the only reason I went there at night was because I thought there'd be no one around. That's what I was really after, not getting the spooky effect of the dark. So you have the pure audio file with the sound of the thing being put into the slot on the wall at the beginning, and do it as you wish. And so I hope you had a good evening. I hope I haven't upset you too much. Remember, this thing is under control. There's nothing to be afraid of. Our ancestors have dealt with this stuff, and we've all been survived fine. It's my burden, shall we say, and it's not yours to worry about. And have a good evening, and feck 'em if they can't take a joke. Good night. Another one was out there, as did David Yallop, who claims that the murders continued somehow, or someone else was involved. And that person, in my opinion, was the TV presenter, paedophile on an industrial scale, and perhaps one of the most evil creatures that ever walked this earth to attain that kind of power. And that was Jimmy Savile. So, and perhaps one of the most evil creatures that ever walked this earth to attain that kind of power. And that was Jimmy Savile. That was Jimmy Savile. That was Jimmy Savile. That was Jimmy Savile.